Hello, world. Welcome back to the Gymnazo Podcast. I'm your host, Kobliska, and I am here with one of my good friends. His name is Michael Hughes, the owner, CEO of Gymnazo. And today we're going to be chatting about a magical part of our body called the knee. And believe it or not, this podcast, we will probably mention the knee very little after we talk about the biology and what the knee does, but more so what the knee helps us do and how it acts as a communication channel from our ankle to our hip and our hip down to our ankle, and essentially just kind of busting the myth of that knees are bad. You know, knees are not bad. Ankles aren't bad. Hips aren't bad. Body parts aren't bad. We just don't know how to make friends for our body parts. And we're going to kind of go a little bit deeper dive into what we mean by friends and how the knee is not a bad thing. Even if you've got a hurt knee, a dysfunctional knee, an injured knee, how can you make that knee better and thrive in its environment, not just in fitness and in the gym setting, but in everyday life? And when you do get a ping of the knees, what do you do with it? What do you do with that information? Do you go to your doctor and you say, hey, I got knee pain, and the doctor says, hey, don't do what you're doing, and you said, I was just walking? You just stop walking the rest of your life? We're going to figure out what you can actually do with that knee discomfort and pain. And when it arises, how do you help it out? How do you make it better? How do you help it go away and avoid knee surgery as long as possible? So without further ado, Michael Hughes, welcome to the podcast.
Super amped to be here, and super amped, I have to say, to be at the new podcast table.
Oh, man.
To be at the new setup. Just, if you're watching on YouTube, just throwing it out there to you. Something a little different, a little spicier, but a little bit more room to play, expand our minds, because our minds were getting a little bit tight on that table. There's so much good thinking going on. Now we have ample.
I feel space. I just feel room.
I know. It's almost like being in the backseat of a luxury car.
I think my breath is getting deeper just sitting at this table. Michael, do you mind diving into the biomechanics of the knee, or just how you kind of look at the knee? Somebody walks in and just says, here's my knee. How do you see it? What are the parts of it? How does it move? Maybe start with what you learned in textbook and then what you've learned since then.
Yeah, I think that's a great kickoff. The knee is like, I honestly thought it was like a thing. Like the knee is like its own individual piece. And that's how I thought about it. It's like, oh, that knee. Got to do some knee exercises. Got to do some terminal knee extensions. Maybe strap some bands to it. Make sure that knee, etc., is really functioning very well. And that's kind of how I was taught. It's really fuzzy. Like it is two things. The knee is two things. Any joint is two things. It's the top half and the bottom half. And I never thought about that. I thought it was like its own individual piece. And the reason why I would say the hip is its own individual piece, or the shoulder is its own individual piece, but the knee is not. That's how I would say it, because it is second fiddle. It's backup guitar. It's not lead vocals. It's really the assister. I look at it, it's kind of like not even the Scottie Pippen to the Michael Jordan, it's even further than that. It's like the equipment manager. Really important, but gets way too much hype. Well, maybe not equipment manager. I'm going too far for that one. But long story short, it is it's the foot and the hip. I'm just going to say it. I just went right to it too fast. But the knee is really the follower. It's the trail. It's the assist. It's the backup singer for how everything goes, and how I look at it, as I certainly look at where it goes. Without a question. Like a knee in a movement assessment, I really watch the knees a lot. But I watch the knees not because I don't really care what the knee is doing itself, because it tells me what the hip or the foot is or is not doing. That's really, really powerful.
So it seems that the knee is this converging point of, if your foot just kept going into an ankle and kept going into your hip, it's this dividing point that's essentially going to tell you what your hip is doing, what your foot's doing, or what they're both doing, or what they're not doing, right?
It's really more what they're not doing. Because if the foot and ankle and the hip are really doing their job, the knees is kind of like, I don't even feel it. It's not even there. It's just this thing that has a nice little knob on the very top of it that whatever. To me, that's what a knee should feel like. It's a transmitter of energy, right? It's not supposed to absorb it. And when it does, The cartilage can only take so much. The ligaments can only take so much. There's really no muscles around the knee. But like the hip, like it's encapsulated by muscle. The shoulder encapsulated by muscle. Ankle's a little different dog. It doesn't really have the same kind of feel, because the ankle and foot's a real special joint. It's both.
Yeah,
It's really both.
So that knee's basically a continuum. It's a continuum. I see it like almost like a spectrum.
Yeah.
You've got, if you think about what's attached to your hip and what's going to your knee, and what's attached to your ankle and what's going up to your knee, right? We've got our quadriceps. Mm-hmm. We've got our hamstrings.
Yep.
Front and back. We've got our adductors.
Yep.
We've got our calf muscles.
Yep.
Not both, but you get the gastroc, right? Basically, there's 10 main muscles that attach around that knee.
You just named 13 of them. I just counted.
Yeah. Well, quads I counted as one. Hamstrings I counted as one. So, hey, there we go. We're around 10. And essentially, you've got your ligaments, you've got tendons that surround that knee. Yeah. And we've got to consider what's the communication like going through that muscle group down into your calf. And same thing when your calf is going up to your leg. We know our knee can, and it's also the bones, right? You've got your femur, you've got your top of your tib, you've got a patella.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Tibia, fib. I mean, the fib's kind of like, it's there.
It's side.
But
tib's really going
tib's the main, is the main animal. And it's really true. Like, I want to just realize that it's so important to understand how chain reaction movement works, right? And what I mean by that is like how your foot works in stepping on sand, stepping on a board, stepping on grass, stepping on whatever the case is, not stepping on anything, floating in water, kicking through water. And really understanding how that knee can get overworked so quickly when these crazy mobile, highly intelligent. I'll use the word. The hip and the foot are highly intelligent, adaptable movers. They can really shake up a lot of capacity in terms of how athletic someone is, how strong someone is. They really sneak in a lot of movements, right? Think about like throwing around a mace. If you're brand new at a mace, you get a lot of turning of the whole thoracic spine versus you just do a little quick whip of the hips. And you're like, whoo, and you feel the whole, that just spinal engine get activated through the pelvis. Same thing with like the 1-inch punch, like what really moved,
And what didn't.
I know.
What needed to stay stable. Everything moved to a certain extent. I almost like you bring up this 1-inch punch and the mace and these little subtle motions. I think a visual helps with this. It at least helps me. And for the visual learners, visual learner listeners here, I think this will be helpful. I imagine like there's sphere that surrounds your knee space. Let's say your knee joint. Then you get the sphere that surrounds your hip and the sphere that surrounds your ankle. Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's say you got 3 spheres stacked on top of each other. Those joints could move anywhere in that sphere.
Right.
Let's not talk about stability or mobility yet, but it could move forward in that sphere, could move back in that sphere, could slide to the right, slide to the left, could go at any kind of hybrid or angle, like anterior lateral, posterior lateral. It could rotate in that sphere, and it can move up, and it can move down, and it can move through space. Yeah. So we're thinking rotation.
And almost equally.
Translation.
With enough flexibility, right? Almost
sure.
Equally.
You're talking about with each sphere?
Flexion, extension, in rotation's different, but, like lateral flexion, like you can get that knee, you get splits, hips, anyways.
Yeah, like the thing about the hip, it's a much fuller sphere, right? You've got a lot of mobility and it's also got to stabilize. Your knee, I imagine, is a smaller sphere because it doesn't have as much potential to move just because of how it's formed. It's built to flex and extend more than anything else. Actually, flexion more than anything else. Extension, it stops at straight out unless you're hypermobile and it's going to go beyond that. But your patella is going to stop you, right? And then you've got your hip that can move flexion, extension, abduction, adduction, internal, external rotation. Your ankle, same kind of thing, just to a more limited extent. But your knee, it's like it just wants to go that way and that way. If we consider the sphere up on top, that hip, if we need to move our hip side to side, say we're like doing a little booty bump, a little hip shake, we're dancing, or we're trying to do a little juke move, or we are doing like a medicine ball throw, just something a little bit simpler, just translating side to side. If our hips can't access that motion, one of those other spheres got to make up for it. And if it's not the knee or the ankle, it's got to go up above. And a lot of times it goes directly to the knee, right? If we have a limited hip mobility and we're going into a lateral lunge and our hip says, all right, I can only get so much abduction. I'm loading up my adductors as I'm doing a sideways lunge. Then I hit a breaking point and then either my ankle is going to flop over or my knee is going to try to cave inward, right? And it's going to create a lot of tension or pressure right around the inside of the knee, the medial side. Same thing if I'm going to slide to my left and my hip can't slide left as far. My knee might try to bow out to the side. We see it all the time, bailouts, especially if your hip is lacking stability, something like a heavy squat or a heavier lunge. How often do we see a knee do a little sideways wobble?
Right. Because
our hip is maybe lacking some of that lateral stability, or maybe our ankle's lacking that stability and our knee has to make up for it. Regardless, simply put, if our hip and ankle aren't doing their job, mobility or stability-wise, it's going to come down to that main point, and now we've got a bad knee.
Right. And
because of bad friends.
Right. And that's, it's all about the neighborhood. And I perfectly said, and that was like something like I wish someone would have told me a long time ago. Fix the knee pain, let's make the quad stronger, the hamstring stronger, adductor stronger. And that's all I'll do it sitting down in a chair with a band literally wrapped around the knee.
Let's look at your knee, right, and work your knee.
And I really appreciate like the heartfeltness, like you want to help somebody, sweet. You're going to do that. I'm going to take that band, wrap around the backside of that knee joint and just let the band bend it, and I'm going to straighten it right out. And I'm going to make that knee stronger. And that's really, it's really a noble fight, but it just misses the whole point of really understanding, like, the hip's so easy to see, right? It's huge. The ankle's a tough one to see, especially when you have, like, dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, pretty easy to see. But the knee, to me, the knee doesn't really care about dorsiflexion and plantar flexion as much as the inversion and eversion, or the calcaneus, the heel bone moving left to right or spinning left to right, the actual ankle complex. Because it's the rotation and side-to-sideness of the knee that really kind of freaks people out, freaks practitioners out, certainly freaks out Instagram, like, oh, don't you put that knee in that inward rotation valgus position, you're going to blow that thing up. And I really love those comments because I used to think the same way. And I was really like, oh, don't you do that. That toe-in squat, bad for the knees. Man, what did we teach ourselves? It's almost like, oh, you drive down that street, you're gonna get into some violence. That's a bad street to go down. No, violence has to happen. You don't just get down the street and violence happens. It's like there has to be something kind of thrown at it. And really understanding, like, if you could really control foot action, you basically tell the knee where to go. And that's why I say the hip and the foot are so smart, and the knees just, I'm gonna say we're dumb. It's not dumb. It just says, all right, cool. What are you going to do, foot? I'm going to follow you. And if the foot really gets awesome pronation, and if the hip really gets really good, I'm just going to go flexion. Just kind of follow me on this one. Flexion of the hip, adduction of the hip, and internal rotation of the hip. And that knee's going to now start flying in. If you have a strong glute, a strong IT band, posterior lateral chain, you have a really strong medial calf that says, I got you. Like, you do what you got to do. And we're just going to spring back and just keep on rocking. Like, how much more access can you have if the knee isn't in fear? Mentally, like your own, like I like to think about the body parts as like it has their own personalities.
Yeah.
And the knees, like he or she, depending on obviously who you are, really gets this mindset. It's like, I'll go wherever you want to go. It's almost like the man's best friend, the dog. Like, the dog's going to kill itself to save you. The knee's kind of like the same thing. It's like, all right, show me to do something. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to bang myself up real good to save my best friend, the foot ankle, and my best friend, the hip.
You're trying to tell me that the knee could be one of the best friends, so much so that it will take the fall for the bad friends getting in trouble.
Basically.
The hip and the ankle.
I think, yes.
So let's talk about this more, all right?
Yeah.
You talked about a foot position, like toes in, and how, like, from the outside, without realizing or understanding why, you just see it and go, I've been told this is bad, and you have a belief now. If we consider our 6 SFT foot positions, right? Challenging the sagittal plane, like we go into a right, left.
Right in front of left in front, right. Feet
Frontal
wide,
plane.
Feet narrow.
Transverse plane.
Toes out, toes in.
Let's talk about why this is so powerful and so important for building friends for the knee, building better friends for the knee, right? If we're focusing on the sagittal plane foot positions, right foot in front or left foot in front, what are the main, and we do a squat, let's say, okay, versus just a neutral foot position. So what are some things that foot position will do for our body in terms of proprioception or tissues loading to help our knee out whenever we're in that position. And I'm going to take the line of, are we loading up hamstrings more, adductors more, glutes more? If we just do a neutral squat, we might be hitting all of the above.
Right.
But let's say we wanted to take our other friends out a little bit, just like a one-on-one date, right? We don't want to take the adductors and the glutes and the hamstrings and the quads all for a date.
I like one-on-one dates.
Let's focus on what friends are we taking out on the date in the sagittal plane when we're going a right foot forward or left foot forward.
Okay, focusing on the right knee. Right, so go right knee, right foot forward to really make it a really one-on-one date. When we squat, we got to pick some action, right?
Let's do a squat. Let's do a squat.
Perfect. When you throw that right foot in front, so that right knee is already much more forward, much more anterior, right? So therefore, you're gonna that knee is gonna shove itself a little bit further. It's not gonna shove itself further. It's gonna get less bend. But the hip up top is gonna get more bend. So you're going to get less dorsiflexion, less ankle bend, less knee flexion, but more hip flexion.
Right, because that femur's pulling forward. If your right foot's forward, that femur's now in a place where the posterior side's going to load more.
Right, exactly. So the left side's going to get way more dorsiflexion because it's already in dorsiflexion. It's pre-positioned. The knee's going to get massive amounts of flexion, and the hip's going to get less. It's going to be more an extension.
So just by putting ourselves in that position, we've already compromised our left knee.
Right,
and we've supported our right knee.
Right, exactly.
So it's like, all right, we got to consider now if we added a squat here, is the person capable of doing it? And if they're not, it's not that they have a bad knee. There might be something deeper that we need to go into to say, how can we wake up these friends so that when they are in a stride stance, they're not having to force their knee to do something that their friends don't want to do. Right? Right foot's forward and we're more flexion. That's going to intentionally load a little bit more glutes in the sagittal plane, hamstrings in the sagittal plane on the right side, while loading your left soleus potentially and left quads quite a bit more, and vice versa for left foot forward.
Right.
So we can intentionalize,
which is interesting because it's a anterior load on the front side, on the left side, and it's a posterior load on the right side.
So you've supported that right leg.
Right.
Like it's probably going to be in less pain if you had a right knee discomfort.
Right, because especially with knee flexion, it's flexing less with that squat.
And you basically just trick their body into saying, hey, right leg, knee, you're not going to do it now. Hamstring, butt, you are. Now, that might bother their left knee, right? So maybe right foot forward, left foot forward isn't the right call to make better friends with the hamstrings, with the glutes, with the quads. So then we've got our frontal plane, right? If we're considering the same kind of a metaphor.
I like this game. Yep.
We haven't had this conversation before. This is fun. We go wide feet. Who are we trying to take out on a date? What muscles? What tissues are trying to support the knee?
You got it. So I'm going to start from the bottom up. Because our feet are wider, and depending if we squat, and I got to say this, right, context dependent, if we squat and go into a little bit more pronation, we're going to get already medial calf. Soleus, right, just call it the soleus, but the medial part. And then we're going to trickle right up on the inside to the adductors. But especially ones that are more situated left to right. Because a lot of the adductors are situated much more forward and backwards, like a hamstring is. There's 5 of them in there. So, and then that's pretty, and then, can't forget about those medial hamstrings.
So it's a lot of the medial section.
Right.
I mean, we think about an MCL, right? That medial collateral ligament that's on the inside. And think about how many people tear, especially when they're cutting on a field and that knee dives inward. The support is below and above. And without that calf and without that medial hamstring and adductor's ability to decelerate, to drop down, to get that inferior load, we're probably going to see knees cave in.
Right.
To shorten that tension in the calf and in the hamstring. So if we notice that, well, shit, we can end up either having push against a band, which we see a lot of, which then contracts the outer muscles, like the TFL, the quads, the glutes, or we just start to find their threshold of success with their wide feet. Like wide doesn't have to be as wide as possible.
Of course not.
Wide can be outside shoulder width.
Right.
Wide for them might be shoulder width. They've never gone wider than that. So just exposing those loads, exposing those friends to that amount of tension, we immediately start to proprioceptively wake up that medial section, which is now going to support the knee in the long run. That's a very simple way to look at it. This is just for squats, but you can then work your way into lateral shifts, and now you're getting some more of that translation and rotation to load up those adductors, right? Second, let's talk about the other position, frontal plane.
Narrow.
So what's loading up more when we go narrow? This is a funky one because your feet are going to stop you from going more narrow.
Right, but you could, by all definition, do a crossover step, which happens all the time in athletics, all the time, right? Good old-fashioned grapevine, karaoke, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be the opposite, just to keep it simple, right? You're going to get that peroneus longus, lateral calf. You're going to get much more IT band, which is not really a muscle, but ligament, right? You're going to get the TFL, tensor fasciolateral. You're going to get the gastroc, excuse me. Well, I guess the lateral had the gastroc, what the case is. But what I meant to say is the glute medius, glute minimus, glute max. Yes, certainly a little bit more.
Squat, flexion,
certainly
sure,
more,
yeah.
right? And then because you're bringing that knee more inside, you're going to get the vastus lateralis. And I'm curious if the sartorius is getting in there too a little bit more because it has like a little crossover. But you're certainly getting the opposite of the inside, right? You're going to get the outside.
And I mean, with that, you think about if you then go to crossover, you've got your foot that's wanting to go into inversion.
Right.
It's wanting to pull, and that's where a lot of ankle sprains happen. And if it's not an ankle, it's going to be that outside knee, and then you're going to have an ache and a pain. So often we have individuals come in, they went for a long run or a hike that they haven't done before, and their knees are shot. And they're like, I think I damaged my knee. It's a bad knee. We're thinking, all right, what attaches right below your knee space? On your lateral side, it's your IT band. It attaches right at that tib fib front side, right? And so if you're doing a lot of hiking and climbing and loading up that TFL glute, you're doing a little crossover stance, you're experiencing that inversion. If those tissues aren't trained, it's going to go right to that attachment point, right where that junction is at that knee. It's going to be achy because it's going to be tugging on it. You're constantly loading. That tendon is just yanking. That IT band is yanking on that bone until it feels like it's tender to the touch.
Right.
Versus we tend to go
through itself.
And we tend to go right after the knee, right?
Right.
But we know that goes up where to attach into what muscle?
Literally, it attaches at the top part of the hip crest.
The TFL,
Yeah.
IT band are almost a one unit, right?
Right.
It just eventually turns into muscle tissue that wraps in the lateral hip. So really what we're getting at is that we're just attacking spaces in such a gentle way, that's not overtraining, it's not giving too much momentum or mass. We're simply loading tissues that support the knee by changing up foot position.
Yeah.
Right? Most powerful one that I'd love for you to break down to because you said toes in. And when we see toes in, toes out, you see toes out a lot more in like power training, lifting. It's great. Does one thing, which provides more range. But like if we break down the toes in, toes out, why are those so important to understand what's going on when somebody tries to squat?
Yeah, I'm going to go the toes in one because it's much more scary. It's not as understood. Toes out, simple, right? It's kind of mass. It's like mass media. Toes in, as you roll in, as you get into the more of a supinated foot, even if it's just positioned, it could still pronate in a toe in, right? It's just positioned by all definition.
It looks kind of nasty, but...
Right, but it's still, it still could though.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, but you're going to be tendency to be more supinated, so more lateral calf is going to be loaded up, right? But it's interesting though, to load up the lateral calf, you have to shorten the medial calf. So the medial calf's already, because that heel, that calcaneus is already kind of tugged in. So it shortens the inside, lengthens the outside, like that inversion sprained feel for the ankle. But then also because you take that knee and you literally spin it in, let's say 22 degrees, just for the fun. 45 degrees is pretty intensive.
I think people really love the number 22.5.
Ooh, I like that.
Hey,
that's a good one.
it's a pretty number. Yeah.
You get the lateral hamstring, right? Because that wraps from back center hip all the way across to that lateral side. That gets lengthened. Then again, from a stress standpoint, the quad's still, but it's a little bit different kind of animal. But then you get the glute max. Because once you rotate that femur internally, that glute max says, "You got me on. Like you got me. You
basically put on a blanket. Yeah, you got your cloak on.
Wrapped it around you.
Cloak.
It's a big deal. That glute max in the transverse plane, it is like, let's go pick a fight. And that's really, really cool. But the interesting part is, like, as you toe in, if your knee follows, your knee's still over your toe. There's nothing changed.
Bingo.
Just the position of your foot changed. If you have a good enough range of motion of your pelvis, your knee says, I'm good with that. That's rock and roll. The hard part about that is because most people are pretty darn tight and the tissue's pretty short on the back side of the hip. It's not a long muscle. You don't have that much range of motion. You're not going to go down as far. You certainly can if you train it, like just with any flexibility. training goes, but you're not going to go down that far, so your range of motion is going to be limited, and therefore your depth in a squat is going to be limited. Oh, and that's a bad thing if you're trying to do a squat and pass a football 1,000 club for your, for that shirt in high school.
Knees are not 90 degrees.
So, but what's fascinating about that though, as you get internally rotated, you've pre-lengthened all those tissues. It's like you've pulled the rubber band back, the bow and arrow back, whatever, further before it even started. So the power production should therefore be more. But the proprioception may be less. Like your own neurons would be like, I don't know about this. So therefore, without confidence, it doesn't really matter. Your brain's just going to shut it down and be like, nah, don't try as hard. Don't push off with the same amount of power, whatever the case is. But you look at all these sports, you especially look at golf. You look at the backswing of golf, toed in, tennis serve, toed in, throwing a baseball, toed in, throwing a football, toed in, sprinter, toed in. It's like all these different little things happening. So it's really fascinating. Again, we're talking about a knee podcast here, but realizing, coming to grips with, is that if you're spending all this time on the knee, I would say you're spending 98% of your time in the wrong place.
I think so too. Yeah, it's
unfortunately.
If somebody comes in with knee, I mean, this is the truth here, is that if somebody comes with knee pain, you need to consider what's above and what's below.
Right.
You may go after the knee and figure out, because there may be some big injury there. I mean, if there's an injury, you're not going to solve it by like if there's a tear or a rupture, or you've got something that's getting real funky, right? You start to go in all these funky foot positions and then make it worse and aggravated. No, let's talk about just making the knee healthier, because it's just feeling a bit uncomfortable. There's no sign of big damage. There's no bruising. There's no swelling. It's just somebody is coming in with some discomfort, and they don't go hike, or they don't go run, or they don't go do stuff that involves their lower body because it aches their knees. And if somebody's getting some knee pain and discomfort from just doing some everyday activities, squatting down, putting stuff in the dishwasher, or up in a counter, or just walking up the steps to get to their house, there's something that we need to understand, which is we need to improve this person's ability to do their ADLs. We need to improve their ability to load that tissue that supports the knee, and then to explode, right? If somebody is, a lot of training is focused on contraction and squeezing and flexing. But we know that eccentric tension builds stronger muscles, and it allows you to accelerate even faster, or to power off even faster, because you've got a better load, so you're going to have a better explode. So, I mean, the number one thing, if somebody's having pain in a push-off, are they loading, first of all? They may not be loading at all, right? They may just be holding such a contracted state. Their feet are gripping the ground. Their knees are flexed because they're afraid of, their quads are flexed because they're afraid of falling. They're not breathing fully. And now every step is just squeezing the life out of their knees, literally. Like, what if you just ground your feet, pronate, absorb your landing, take that shock into your foot and ankle, which is designed to do that, right. Not your knee. Your knee takes a lot of stress. I think there was some stat of like your knee takes 3 to 4 times the weight of your body or something, that much force. Oh, wow. I don't know what that fully means, except that your knee is just taking a lot of stress. But that factoid made me think, like, okay, if it's taking that much stress, do we need to teach the knee to do more and more of that? Or can we offload the knee? I like that. How do we do that? And what does that even mean? Well, it's about eccentric tensions and about preloading tissues and then going and doing activity. Preload with toes in and do a squat. Don't go to your deepest squat, right?
Or don't put 300 pounds on your back, obviously. Exactly. Progression, that load potential for change, like anything else.
So many people come in doing body weight can build tissue, can build muscle, can build strength if it's a novel position, right? It's probably less of building muscle mass because you're not loading it with excessive mass, but you're becoming more aware of how that tissue is loading. So neurologically, proprioceptively, you are now doing a better job, a more efficient job of handling that load and weight versus just saying, yep, there's my knee again.
Well, there's PRP therapy, which is platelet stuff, and they inject it into the knee. Like, I don't want to discount what they're trying to do there. They're trying to heal a tendonitis. They're trying to heal a rupture, a tear faster because the injury's there, Like, that's a big deal. Like, to not say, like, well, what are you talking about? Well, movement can certainly heal that too, but a tear's a tear. Sometimes it needs to be stitched back together.
Or just rest. Don't do anything.
So it's very important that once you get that, but the fact of the matter is, like, it got there for a reason. And that reason, because most knee pain is non-contact. Like, how many football games have you seen, NFL football games, someone just running and they just buckle down right on the ground. They go to slow motion and they see that knee just go bloop. And and you're like, and it's like, yep, we ruptured his ACL, preseason game, where the case is, or tore his hamstring, where the case is. Like, no one touched him. It's like, yeah, interesting. I wonder what forces of nature were going on in there at an imbalance for that to rupture its own self.
Yeah, I think that's a different specimen too. Like, if they're going to be out there driving hardcore, feet in the ground, going max speed, max level. It's a war zone.
And there's cleats involved with all kinds of extra traction. I get it. But the point I'm trying to make is that why that happened? Versus getting tackled, slide tackled in soccer, literally tackled shoulder pads into the knee joint. I get it. Sorry, hip. Sorry,
good luck avoiding that injury.
Yeah, it's just sometimes a bus wins. Over 300-pound squats. It's just not enough. But it's a concept of really, like, how good is your hip ankle at decelerating, right? That whole point you just called loading, at slowing it down so it has that capacity to rebound back, to give it a chance. And I don't know. To me, like, it just goes in this whole, like, how are you training it? And, like, are you training the knee to be successful, safe, or are you training it to be dangerous? Like, all by itself. Can you take the knee out on a date and say, you got to fly all by yourself? If your hip's not helping you, if your foot's not helping you, how are you going to survive?
I mean, talking about the everyday athlete too. Somebody's just going to go out for a walk or for a stroll. Right. If you're a coach and you ask your group of individuals who's feeling a little bit of knee discomfort today, I guarantee it's probably going to be more than half the room. Or nobody will say anything because it's just expected. And I think that's one of the bigger issues, is that we're asking questions like, how do you feel today? How's your knees doing? How's your back doing? Oh, it's normal. But a lot of times normal isn't natural, right? Normal is just what's expected and how we've always gone about things. Like, oh yeah, I'm getting older, or oh yeah, I ran yesterday, my knees hurt. Normally I take 2 or 3 weeks off and then I go run again. It's like we're going down a downhill spiral if you're coming in daily and your knees are hurting. And we're working out and training. If your training is making those tissues worse, it's not training, that's a sport, right? You want to train to make these tissues as resilient and as efficient and as communicative as possible, right? They want to communicate to other tissues. So if your training is not simulating what they're going to experience in real life, what those people that you're coaching are going to experience in real life, like stairs, like an uphill or like a downhill, or like grass or like sand, or maybe you're on ice. Maybe you're walking around, you're afraid of slipping. It's just down a curb, up a curb. There's different angles, especially on trails. Your foot's going to be everted, inverted, pronated, supinated. It's going to be extra dorsiflexed up a hill, extra plantar flexed down a hill.
Right. A slope.
There's a reason why knees hurt really bad going downhill, and some people have really bad knee pain going up a hill, right? Let's think about this. You come down a hill, why do your knees hurt? What's not decelerating? And what's doing more of it? Your knees are probably trying to drive forward, and you're thinking about your steps like, when I come downhill now, I just like toe in a little bit, I walk sideways a little bit, I spread the wealth to like the TFL, to the adductors, to the hamstrings, and then I go straight down, get the quads burning a little bit.
And then kick it back again, a little toe out, even a little toe in a little bit. Exactly, and I love that. Like, how do skiers stop? Sideways.
Toe in. Or sideways. Toe in or sideways. Slow down, toe in. And
slow down. Or, how do they diverge forward downhill motion? Not by going forward. It doesn't mean that the quad can't hit it. Doesn't mean that the soles can't hit it. Doesn't mean that, to me, a good old-fashioned posterior sled pull, get those suckers tuned up. But that's concentric, though. What about the opposite? It doesn't have that. It's so funny. Like, we can get them strong, but strong doesn't make them elastic. It actually through the rebuilding process removes elasticity. It makes it tighter.
Yeah, compact and supports, and it's protecting like an embrace, but it's your tissue.
Exactly. So it's really funny. Like, making the knees. A lot of people say, I was told I got to make the muscles around my knee stronger, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, no, you don't. I mean,
Yes, but we also see hip and ankle as the knee, right?
Exactly. So it's like, do you really want to do that, or do you want, like, let's first talk about where the pain, like, why is the pain there? I think it's a really important question. If you're listening and you have a client who has knee pain, if you have knee pain, you have to ask, when does it show up?
And where is it in the knee? The knee is not a knee, right? You got a front knee, you got an inside knee, you got an outside knee, you got a backside knee.
Right. Because that's going to tell you a lot of the story. And if it's a deceleration issue, okay, probably quad, probably calf. Again, I'm just making a general statement. If it's an acceleration issue, probably hamstring. Again, not 100%, but you're kind of looking at these different aspects of like, oh wow, I didn't say the knee at all. And it's really interesting to find out like when I realized that the soleus didn't cross the knee joint, and only the gastroc did, I was like, oh wow. So what's that mean to the physics of it? And really, so the soleus, which is a bigger muscle than the gastroc, it doesn't look like it, but it's sneaky down there. It's a big beast. It's like real long and
muscle,
flat. It's long and flat, and it really dominates the tibia, dominates it. So if you're going downhill and you have this femur going forward, and you have this tibia being ripped backwards by a unresponsive, too tight, whatever you want to call it, soleus, you're going to get that shearing on that knee, and that patellar tendon or whatever is going to be just nasty. It's going to be nasty.
I think what we see too is a lot of games of tug of war on people's bodies. Like the tug of war is always there, but it needs to be a friendly game of tug of war. If there's a lower joint and an upper joint, you got your ankle and you got your hip, and they're both pulling apart. You want to pull that knee up to your hip, or the ankle saying, "No, I'm really tight. I got to pull you down to me." Now the knee is like, "Shit, man, who do I go with?" And it just goes forward, or it just goes backward, right? And I think what happens is, a lot of knee discomfort isn't from dysfunction. It's from overtraining one part of your leg, like around. It's only just your quads are training. Like, how many people do you see squat that ain't got squat? There's no glutes in there. They're squatting, but they are all quad. Cyclists especially come in. I'm not dogging on them, but I know that we probably need to develop their glutes a little bit more because they're probably not getting a full load. They're just driving their calves, driving through the quads, and they're playing a game of tug of war downward, and we need to pull them back up to their butt. Right? If they're all the knee and you're squatting and your knees are going over your toes, nothing wrong with that. But have you ever squatted with your knees over your toes and your butt pushing backwards? Mm-hmm. So now you create length in the hamstring, upper hamstring, right? Or you create length at the glutes. So now, let's say, oh yeah, I do a lot of split squats, right? 1 foot forward, other foot forward. Great. You create a little bit of rotation in your hip, right? Give it some quad work and some calf work. But now you are always doing split squats. You're always doing neutral squats, always toes straight ahead or toes a little bit out. And now you've been doing that for months. Your legs are stronger than they've ever been, but your knees are also hurting more than they ever have. Man, I'm training too much. Maybe we're just training too much in one direction. Maybe we need to get those other muscles that also go into your knee, not just the front side on the patella and then that patellar tendon and then those quad, but into your adductors and into your IT band TFL and glutes. We start to incorporate the frontal and transverse plane toe positions, that now you start squatting like that, you're squatting way less weight, and you're doing a lot more reps, but your knees don't hurt. And now your knees are not inflamed anymore, and now you go back to do what you were doing before, and you're stronger.
Yeah.
What happened there? I think what we see too is a lot of games of tug of war on people's bodies. Like the tug of war is always there, but it needs to be a friendly game of tug of war. If there's a lower joint and an upper joint, you got your ankle and you got your hip, and they're both pulling apart. You want to pull that knee up to your hip, or the ankle saying, "No, I'm really tight. I got to pull you down to me." Now the knee is like, "Shit, man, who do I go with?" And it just goes forward, or it just goes backward, right? And I think what happens is, a lot of knee discomfort isn't from dysfunction. It's from overtraining one part of your leg, like around. It's only just your quads are training. Like, how many people do you see squat that ain't got squat? There's no glutes in there. They're squatting, but they are all quad. Cyclists especially come in. I'm not dogging on them, but I know that we probably need to develop their glutes a little bit more because they're probably not getting a full load. They're just driving their calves, driving through the quads, and they're playing a game of tug of war downward, and we need to pull them back up to their butt. Right? If they're all the knee and you're squatting and your knees are going over your toes, nothing wrong with that. But have you ever squatted with your knees over your toes and your butt pushing backwards? Mm-hmm. So now you create length in the hamstring, upper hamstring, right? Or you create length at the glutes. So now, let's say, oh yeah, I do a lot of split squats, right? 1 foot forward, other foot forward. Great. You create a little bit of rotation in your hip, right? Give it some quad work and some calf work. But now you are always doing split squats. You're always doing neutral squats, always toes straight ahead or toes a little bit out. And now you've been doing that for months. Your legs are stronger than they've ever been, but your knees are also hurting more than they ever have. Ah, man, I'm training too much. Maybe we're just training too much in one direction.
Medial. Is it called the VO Max? I haven't
I
said
thought
it
you
in
were going
a long
to go
time.
talk about VO2 Max, to be honest.
Oh,
I was
not
like,
VO
I don't know if we're going that
No,
route.
it's not VO2. I think it's called the VO Max, something like that. I haven't said that phrase in such a long time. I haven't even said it, but like I remember people talking about like that medial quad muscle, and it's almost like a separate muscle in some people's minds, and you got to get that real strong so it tracks that calf or tracks that patella more.
We're talking
immediately.
VMO?
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm like, what's
The
VO Max?
VMO, man, I gotta write that down. I can't believe I haven't said that word in so long.
Yeah,
which
I
is
know
a
what you're talking about.
testament, everybody, that how I have disassociated myself.
That's a hip and ankle, man. There's no knee in there. It doesn't even exist.
What I said? I said VO Max. That's
Hey,
close.
that's great.
VMO. Oh my goodness. I hope someone's laughing.
I am. It's good. I know what you're talking about.
The
Yeah.
VMO, like, oh, you got to pull that patella over. You got to get that guy strong. And I'm like, wait a minute. I think you're just trying to pull the train to make it line up versus how about you just fix the track? And that whole concept of over focusing on that zone. Anyways, sorry, I'm going to come back to.
I'm gonna give you a
square
fun
one
fact
here.
about the patella to be a little share of some fun. Your patella, believe it or not, is just as unique to you as your thumbprint, your fingerprint. Everybody's patella is different.
I knew it was special. I just
Like
didn't know
extra
how.
special. Some people's patellas are higher, some are lower, some are larger, some are smaller.
That's interesting, though.
And
Really.
even as a baby, it's not even bony, it's cartilage. So that thing is developing, I think, is like between the ages of like 2 and 6, depending on the impact and what you're doing walking around. That thing is cartilage and then hardens as you're growing. I think it's pretty significant, especially as you're learning to walk and your body's learning to handle load. That patella is learning how to track itself based on how you're walking. And I would imagine that if you've been in one of those like bouncy rings or whatever, it's supported, like your pelvic core is
you wanna
supported,
go there?
that your knee never
Yeah.
fully develops. If you spend a lot of time in that little bouncy thing, that your hips are now not as strong because in the developmental stages, it was supported
I have a story about this.
and
Go for it.
popping.
Yeah. Yep.
And now your knees are not going to be as strong. And then you end up either bow-legged or toe-in or, whatever it could end up
Bow-legged.
changing. And now your body's ability to handle force through your foot, through your ankle, through your knee, through your hip is completely compromised because you haven't developed your hip and your ankle. And now you've got all these knee issues growing up. But as soon as you then come back to your foundations of foot and ankle and hip, I wonder what happens to your knee. Does it learn to track different? Does your patella change its placement? I'd imagine it's something like a change of tracks because of your lower tissue and your upper tissue and how they're reforming spirally, diagonally. Nothing's attached straight up and down or side to side, right? But the more rotation you get and the more triplane loading you're going to get through your foot, ankle, and your hip, and you do it intentionally, you start to give your body an opportunity to self-organize to then find a better way to handle forces. Fascinating stuff. I thought it was a cool little fact.
Gosh, thumbprint. I love it. Going through the child development stages that I've recently gone through and still going through, they really, it's interesting to start reading articles about like the bouncy ring that you connect to the top of the door frame, and they just bounce. And it's like people are starting to realize, therapists are starting to realize, you're training them to load calves all day long. And forefoot, which is pretty cool, right? I mean, it's pretty cool what you're training them to do.
Kid's got some really big calves, bro.
Right, but they don't go through hips. And I ran into a fellow parent just walking through the park and just saw one of their kids like literally walking on toes. Younger kid, 2, 1.5, and I just chatted with the mom a little bit, and I said, hey, I'm noticing, and she's like, yeah, we were told from our pediatrician that we shouldn't do the bounce thing anymore because they were doing it for like 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, and now she doesn't know how to walk through her heels. We have to reteach it. I mean, it isn't a permanent fix, but it was
Right.
that really like interesting, like wow. Like it is a training tool. It's an amazing training tool, just like the rattle. Maybe different
On the
podcast.
podcast, yeah, for sure. What are some ways that we've talked about squats, right? Talked about the hips. In these developmental stages, any age, and then you teenager, go high school age, college age, and then as an adult, what is something that is kind of universal, that like squats that we could work on that's like for ankle, right? If we talk a lot about the hip, and we talk about a little bit ankle position in those SFT positions, what's like a simple exercise or activity that's going to give us a good gauge of how their ankle is able to stabilize, and if their ankle doesn't do it, we're going to see their knee track over. I'm thinking like some single leg type stuff.
Yeah, so I'm going to go non-equipment first.
I love it, yeah.
Because we can go equipment easy. What I really love about an ankle is to isolate it out. It's like I really like going kneeling. One single leg kneeling, so one leg's out in front. And you can basically weight shift kind of almost all your weight over to that foot. Still feels stable, shutting down the hips for the most part, and really kind of getting just that knee and ankle complex kind of all by itself. And then from there, because it's so anterior, you're really not going to test too much dorsiflexion because you really have to shoot way over to go get it. But you can really start to have that person literally move their knee left and right. And you can just see, does that foot follow along? So I'm actually driving the knee to see what the foot does. And I can get to see, does it go through inversion and eversions, pronation and supination? When I say just spin your tib and fib, just spin it. Do I see the heel spin too?
It's subtle, right?
But it's not that weight bearing, and it's super isolated. The hip can't help for the most part, So it's really just knee ankle. Then you can go all the way standing. And what I like about the true stretch, which I know I'm throwing in some equipment here, but long story short, a mob stick, a wall, something to stabilize them so they do not have to worry about balance. And literally say, can you put pressure through all 5 toes? Like, can you put pressure through the big toe? Can you feel the small toe? Can you feel at least the big toe and the other four toes? Can they go through forefoot loading and unloading, supination and pronation? Forefoot, right? So not the back half, but the front half. And then at the very last, a good old-fashioned opposite side foot, single leg balance reach. We're getting the whole system going. It's what we do in our assessment. And to really see how their whole body integrates through that foot and ankle and really telling them. And then the last thing I do is literally have them go toe in, toe out. Actually, no, I'm going to go toe straight, both hands on hips, and just spin their hips left and right. Because I'm saying now drive your hips, and I want to see those heels move. And it's really telling. Honestly, I do that one probably every single time, just to see, do I see the opposing inversion on one side, eversion on the other side, and then the flop, inversion on that side and eversion on the opposite side. Especially with like a plantar fascia. Anyways, it's really fascinating to see like how those heels wick. You got to take the shoes off to really get, or have some barefoot shoes on. But those are probably my 3 that I really, really like. Non-equipment based.
It's a great way to see the chain reaction that occurs. Like if you've got a driver, a lot of people are knee drivers when they walk. Like they walk with their knees, or they walk with their calves, or they walk with their toes, or they walk with their head. How many people do you see walk with their head like forward, or run with their head really far forward, but nothing else is following their head? It's just like they're continuously falling. Just by asking the person that's in front of you to drive, and like when they're kneeling down and you had them drive their knee forward or turn their knee in and turn their knee out, you're going to see when that knee turns in, hopefully that foot collapse. And as you turn that knee out, hopefully you see that foot arch. And that's like the foundations of just getting their foot to breathe. You see it flowing into a lengthening and shortening, right? It's like an inhale and an exhale. And then you start to just see if they are aware of those things occurring, because so many people are so unaware of their feet. And a lot of it comes down to their shoes are too small, too tight, or too much cushion and support. Same thing with the knee. There's too much supporting their knee. How many people come in with knee braces because their knee hurts? There's nothing wrong with a knee brace, but if you rely on a knee brace to support your knee is going to only get weaker because it's being supported by an external thing. Definitely nothing wrong with it.
But
However,
for what purpose?
Yeah, you're using it to help
what
get
end?
them back into more support. Do they have an injury and they don't want the surgery? Like, there's a lot of things to consider naturally. But for the most part, anybody with that knee discomfort, we take them down a kneeling position and see their foot move. If their foot can move or it starts to move, all of a sudden now they've got some proprioceptive awareness in their foot. Their foot can feel the ground. Sometimes just taking shoes off and having somebody do a squat, their knee pain goes away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's going to be fascinating. You're like, we didn't do a damn thing today. I just make you take your shoes off. Your knee pain's gone. That's amazing,
Yeah.
Just letting the feet breathe. Let them be a support. Let them be a base.
But I have to say this. I have to plug because the BAPS board, that one crushes it in terms of ability. It's not very functional because the ground doesn't really move the way that we're asking the board to move. But in terms of showing off, like I would say good chunk, I would say the majority cannot hit in an everted roll, a
Like
pronated roll.
Kick out, kick it in.
They can they can crush sagittal plane, dorsiflexion plantar. They can actually get pretty good lateral, but they can't roll into it. They can't roll the edge, clockwise or counterclock. It's really interesting. They can go into supination super, super well. But there's no neuromuscular firing to make that happen. Like they say, my brain hurts to try to do it.
That's wild.
So, anyways, that's
Yeah, a little tilt board. Powerful piece of equipment.
Exactly.
Show me what your ankle can do, and we're going to realize what it can't do.
Right. And again, I'm going to say it's the majority, they cannot pronate. So it's really interesting. They really walk on this really loaded lateral side, which is a locked up foot ankle, which therefore means it's not going to take much absorption at all. So what's the next joint?
Right to the knee.
Right to the knee. Man, I'm glad we got the MDMC course. I tell you what.
What's the, like, if we're going to talk about the knee, we talk a lot about different joints and different mechanics and chain reaction, how to train these pieces. What's like those little nuggets of knowledge that I don't want to let the whole course out here? I mean, it's going to take hours to talk about it. Got to do the course. But what is it about the knee that we go into in this course that even when you were learning about the knee in such a bigger, more global way through Gray Institute and then applying it with our clients, what is it, the spin that we take on the knee and educating what it can do and how it works and how to train the knee?
I think it's really just understanding like the physics of it first. Like we said it well, or you said it especially well. Is how does it load? Really understand how all the muscles first slow the knee down, then speed it up. Like that was like the biggest aha moment. And I think what we do well is it's really don't try to run faster. Realize how you can slow down from speed faster, and how the knee and its friends really do that very, very well. And if you can really understand the foot and you can really understand the hip, and I think we do a great job of talking about that, then the knee, it kind of gets taken care of. And that's a really kind of cool thing. It's like, oh, I don't have to worry about it that much. Or if someone presents themselves with knee pain, you tweak the foot. Tweaking the foot, changing its angle, changing its position, changing its height, and changing the same thing with the hip. If you can involve better foot mechanics, if you can involve better hip mechanics, and have that knee pain literally go away. Like I tell a story in the course. Someone came with massive knee pain so bad, like 2 physical therapists, 2 surgeons, says, that's all it's bad. That's as good as it's going to get.
You just got a bad case of the knees.
Got a bad case of the knees. The bee's knees. And she reluctantly tried one of our group training sessions, and my tweak was toeing in on a lateral lunge. Knee pain. She literally freaked out, in a sense, called me the next day crying because of happiness. My leg is sore, my knee's not. What'd you do? And I'm like, I kind of forgot what I did. It's like just a small thing. But having the understanding, the know-how to be like, to not be stuck. Like, I don't know what to do. It's like, no, I got 20 options. I got 10 options with the ankle. I got 10 options with the hip. Don't even start with the thoracic spine. which we haven't talked about at all in this podcast.
Which is crazy, man.
You start messing with the thoracic spine, you start really messing with the knee, but we'll keep it simple, though.
Yeah, I want to share a story, too, before we close this one down. I used to have extremely bad knee pain. This is like elementary school through middle school, and then I just kind of got over it and dealt with it. I was like, it's growing pains. Well, we know that didn't happen. It wasn't growing pains.
I had to think about that for a quick second.
I didn't get much taller for those of you listening. 5'4", we stayed this way. But basically, I was diagnosed with Osgood-Schlatter's disease, and I wasn't really sure what that is. It was just kind of a swelling around the knee and inflammation. And when that swelled up, dude, I didn't want to walk. I would sit on the couch, like having to hold my knees in a position, just to the point where I'm an athletic kid. And then all of a sudden, I go for a run, and then the next day, my knees were swollen right around my kneecap, right below my kneecap. I got this big bump, big bulge coming out on both knees. Go to the doctor, they gave me this little Osgood-Schlatter strap, pull it around. It's like a little knee support that kind of lifts up, so it takes off some of the compression. It helped, but didn't get rid of it, and it felt like my knees got weaker and weaker as I was doing it. And not knowing any better, that's just kind of like how I just dealt with it, right? And looking back now, at that age, to have no hope and just be like, all right, this is just kind of how it is. I got bad knees. Like, that's how I felt. And I dealt with like different back pains and shoulder pains and stuff growing up. We've talked about that in the past. But my knees, that's one that, I've had little knee stuff pop up here and there, but my thought isn't, oh shit, my knees are fucked, right? It's my knees need some more assistance. So anytime I had knee pain coming up, as I was learning these things in the past decade, it's like, all right, got to go to my TFL, check that one out, do a little foam rolling, maybe it's tight. That didn't really help at all. All right, I'm going to go to the calf. All right, that didn't really help at all too. It just felt really good. All right, I'm going to try my inner thigh. And then you just start kind of working around these different spots, and all of a sudden knee pain dissipates like 80%. And you just feel it. It's like the lingering. And then all of a sudden you go move and squat, and it's like, I still kind of feel it. But the more you move after you've primed that tissue, all of a sudden the knee realizes it's got friends. It's kind of turns off that inflammation, as an easy way to put it.
Yeah,
and
enough.
my butt and my ankle now are taking the load of what was going into my knee. It was just these forces that were jamming. Nothing wrong with my knee. My knee was like, I'll just take it. Keep punching me. Keep kicking me. I will take the next hit. It's like, no, knee, you don't need to do that. And I am so inspired now to work with kids who are working with a little bit of knee pain, because you're not going to fix something. It's like, we got a foam roll, we got to stretch, but you can set them up for better and better success with better movement. And it's just preparing them and priming them better. There's nothing really to fix. There's only something to do better, right? We're not fixing a bad knee, though you may phrase it that way. What we're doing is supporting a knee that's been taking a lot of extra stress. And if we can change that narrative of like, anytime we've got a joint pain, which a lot of times it's knees and low back, those two spots are two spots that transfer a lot of forces. Ground reaction force, you're doing a lot of gravity and having to hold yourself with your posture, low back. That's going to affect your knees, and your knees and low back, they're like a tag team of taking all the bullshit. The hips and the ankles and the thoracic spine are what's surrounding that space. We build better T-spine tissues, like the whole core. We build better hip tissues. We build better ankle tissues. Those ones that are in between that are taking all this extra hits, they're going to be very happy, good tissues.
Yeah, and give you a long life of movement that typically, typically something they beat up and they're done by 65. And that's it. You're riding the pine the rest of the show. It's like,
there are miles left, man. You got miles left. And even if they are shot and getting gunky, a lot of times people have damaged tissues and they learn how to use their hips and their ankles more. Those tissues that were hurting remain damaged, but they don't hurt.
Gosh, I got to bring one quick story up before we end.
Thank you, please.
Our G1 program, our group level 1 program, was founded by a person, myself, but inspired by a person who had, as she would describe, bone-on-bone knees. And she tried our group 2 level. At that point, we didn't have a 1. It was the 2, make it simple. She said, make me a program that I could do that don't beat up my knees because they're bone-on-bone for years of running. I can only do cycling. That's the only thing that makes me feel good. You mailed me a program that I could do, and I'm in. And that's what we built. We built G1, low impact. She trained in G1 for, I'm going to make a rough number here. I think 8 years longer before she got surgery on her knees. 8 more years. And she would say quite pain-free until it's like, okay, I'm ready to go now. I I think her insurance kicked in, and she was boom. Let's get these things done. It's possible. It's there. If you want to go after those types of clients and have the knowledge to train those types of clients, then it's just want to let you know it's out there, and we're working on it. I would love to say that we have all of it, but I don't know. We're just working on it.
No, man, stepping stones are key. And nobody's going to have all of it. If you think you got all of it, you've stopped too soon.
I would say so too. Yeah. Well.
Hey, anything you want to add before we close this one down? I mean, that was pretty good story. Opening that G1 session, man.
I think this was the bee's knees. I'll say it again.
Well, thank you all for listening. If you want to know more and you want to dive into ankle mechanics, knee mechanics, hip mechanics, spine mechanics, and how they all work together, integrate into one solid, holistic human being, we have a course. It's a multidimensional movement coaching course. Take you through the extensions of all of those biomechanics, and then how to train behaviorally and understand physics in such a way that you've got the biology, you've got the behavioral, you've got the physical, and it all comes together as one great program to serve your people. Please, please, please reach out. It's a powerful program, and it has changed my life. It's changed our coaches' lives, and it's made great coaches of good coaches and even better coaches of those coaches. So keep on keeping on, y'all.
Right on. See you next time.
See you soon.